UCF had no answers for Jake Retzlaff, but can they find their own answers at quarterback?
You are Locked On UCF, your daily podcast on the UCF Knights, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on in to Locked On UCF, your daily UCF podcast. I'm your host, Mike G, and thank you so much for making Locked On UCF your first listen of every day. Joining me is my guy. He's covered college sports for a long time, particularly in the South and particularly UCF. My guy, Thrift Behringer from Sports Visions. Thrift, let's jump right into the conversation here, man. They had no answer. UCF had no answer for Jake Retzlaff on Saturday. On last week, we said he was the one they had to stop, and they just couldn't stop him.
Yeah, come on, be honest with me right now, Mike. Did you heard of this guy before he got to BYU?
No.
Because, he was the number one junior college quarterback a few years ago before transferring at BYU. Mm-hmm. But this guy has turned BYU now into a contender that maybe make a deep playoff run. Who would have thought that at the beginning of the season? But this guy's electric, and it was a pleasure to watch him on the field. He was definitely by far the best quarterback that played between these two teams.
I was impressed, Thrift, that whenever BYU needed to play, Jake Retzlaff showed up, especially on key third downs during this game. Every time it felt like UCF was about to seize a little bit momentum, they could not get Retzlaff off the field.
No doubt about it. Remember in that first drive, he had a 38-yard or 28-yard scamper for a touchdown on a 3rd and long. I didn't know he had that kind of capability in him before watching this game. But this guy, again, electric with his legs, can make the plays when need to. But it really wasn't a lot of explosive plays. He just didn't turn the football over except for once. But by then the game was pretty much over with. But he lived up to the hype coming in here, and he maybe is vying for that Big 12 Player of the Year if the season continues going the way it is for the Cougars.
One thing that stood out to me was they did not take shots down the field with Retzlaff in this one. Now, he only took 3 shots of 20 yards or more. He connected on one of them, but probably the biggest shot he had was at the end of the first half when, again, it looked like UCF was about to seize some momentum, and then, bam, they give up the touchdown pass to Retzlaff.
Yeah, and that was bad tackling, if anything, because come on, you had him wrapped around. It was a nice little, 15 to 18-yard route that Retzlaff hit him in a perfect stride. Bad tackling by UCF and a 62-yard scamper by Chase Roberts. But again, it was the defense and the lack of tackling from UCF that led to a lot of touchdown drives for BYU. But to give credit to Retzlaff, when he presented with an option to score, he was able to capitalize with his team, and they looked efficient, and they look like a team that is going to maybe win the Big 12 this year. Again, did not expect that, especially a few weeks ago when I thought UCF was going to be the favorite when they started 3-0 this year.
Yeah, I think competition had a lot to do with that. In today's college football, it's really hard to win without dynamic quarterback play. Now, is Retzlaff Superman? No, but he did what they needed to do, and he executed the game plan. And another thing I noted here was he had one drop by his receivers, and he finished with a 66% completion percentage, but his adjusted was just a little over 70%. Inside of 20 yards, Thrift, he was efficient.
Yeah, and this guy, 18 touchdowns, 7 interceptions on the year. And if you look at his stats just for this game alone, Mike, it's not like they're mind-blowing. I mean, he was 16 of 24, like you said, 228 yards. He had 38 yards on the ground plus a rushing touchdown, but he didn't turn the ball over, and he did what was necessary for that offense to move the football against UCF. But I like Retzlaff. I really do, and I think he is going to be someone that maybe, and then because he's only a junior, maybe next year, not this year, but maybe next year, he's vying for maybe even a Heisman Trophy contender. I know I'm throwing that out there. Maybe that's a hot take, Mike, but the great game from him from UCF. I know I come in with a hot takes first time I'm on the show, but I think this game was more about Retzlaff and BYU than it was about UCF. Okay, nothing to take away from UCF. It was a lack thereof performance on defense, but I think BYU is just the better team, and I think they were better coach, and they look like one of the favorites, them and Iowa State, to win the Big 12.
Yeah, look, you just have to give BYU credit. They came in and they took this game. So I know there were some missed tackles on the UCF side, but I was really impressed with how they executed their game plan in this one, Thrift. They stuck to it. They didn't make a ton of mistakes, and they just looked like a really, really well-coached football team. Now, some other things that stood out to me in this one was Retzlaff made enough plays to keep the UCF defense honest. That they went for 255 yards on the ground, averaging 5.3 yards per carry, and they controlled the ball in this one. I thought it was an impressive performance all around. We're giving a lot of credit to Retzlaff, but when it comes down to it, BYU won time of possession 40 minutes to 20 minutes in this one, and they played keep away from UCF.
I think that's the game plan heading into the game. They didn't care about having the big explosive plays when they can have drives that are between 5 to 10 minutes long, as you made mention, dominating the time of possession. There was a point in the game when it was 17-0. UCF scores a touchdown. They force a punt. They go down and then kick a field goal. It's 17-10. You're less than a minute left in the half. You feel like you got all the momentum in the world, and that's when we talked about the big play. It wasn't a long pass. It was just bad tackling. And then, honestly, after that, I think the game was pretty much over with. I know they still had a whole nother half, but that is a backbreaker heading in. Instead of being down by 7, you're down by 14, and the rest was history.
Yeah, it was history. Look, they did what they had to do. And kind of changing gears here a little bit, you talked about how BYU and Iowa State are the leaders to win the Big 12, and the winner definitely is going to make this 12-team playoff, inaugural 12-team playoff. Last week, I asked my regular guest, Andrew Glukov, who needs this game more? Is it BYU or is it UCF? If you're UCF, you're sliding right now, and you need to stop the slide. If you're BYU, respect is on the line. A playoff berth is on the line. I think that they earned the respect that they needed in this one.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And remember, back in 2020, they were undefeated. I think they played Coastal Carolina. They weren't getting the respect they're getting now, obviously. And now we're actually talking about them obviously being in a better conference than they were 4 years ago in the Big 12. But Kalani, I don't want to even try to mispronounce his last name. Satake. I'm sorry for those out there, BYU fans that are watching right now. I do not want to mispronounce his name. I'll tell you this. If he continues building and winning the way he is at BYU, there will be top-level programs coming after him. And that is a fact on that. But let's give credit where credit is due. They come into the Big 12 this year, and they have beaten every team that's been put in front of them. I'm looking at the rest of their schedule. I think they're going to be favored in the rest of the games. And you're right. If they finish undefeated, they're definitely going to make it. And I'm willing to bet there may be 2 teams, depending on what happens with Iowa State. And I don't think anyone would have expected that in the Big 12, and not those 2 teams specifically. Oklahoma State was a favorite for a lot of people. I talked about UCF. Utah was a favorite for a lot of people, a team that is really close in proximity to BYU. But the Cougars have been the storyline of the Big 12 for 2024.
They have. And I think you said 2 teams. I think there's a good chance that 3 teams get in. You've still got Kansas State lurking at 17th ranked in the country at 7-1. And you've got the 23rd ranked Colorado Buffaloes at 6-2, who I think the committee would love to get Deion's team into this playoff. They're absolute prime time, no pun intended. But they don't play BYU or Iowa State down the stretch. So they could win out and just be sitting on the outside of that Big 12 title game and not have to risk a 3rd loss and possibly slide in there depending on how things fall with Kansas State.
So they have a bye, the Cougars do, and then they take on at Utah. And then they have Kansas, at Arizona State, and then Houston. Obviously, out of those 4 games, the one that probably worries most Cougar fans is playing your rival on the road. And then right now, Utah obviously not living up. Cam Rising, who's like an 8th-year senior, got hurt again, so he's no longer starting for Utah. So that one's going to be a big game in a few weeks. But great game for BYU. They executed their game plan. And Coach Kalani, he looks like he's going to have his team undefeated. Like I said, every game that they have, they're going to be the favorite in. Why can't they finish 12-0? But they took care of business against UCF. Nothing to take away from the lack of tackling. I keep saying on defense for UCF. I really think this more had to do with BYU is just better.
Yeah, they were the better team. BYU fans felt disrespected because the line moved and actually favored UCF in the bounce house. We're going to talk a little bit more about UCF side of the ball on offense right after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked on UCF is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook thrift. I don't know. Who did you have? Did you take BYU in the points in this one?
Yes, I did not take UCF. I did not think they had a chance. And this is now consecutive years that Central Florida has had 5 consecutive losses after starting the season 3-0. Feeling like from watching your video from last week, you were picking the upset, man. I can't believe you did that, dude.
I did. But look, looks like Thrift won some money, whether you picked BYU or you picked UCF. Go check out our friends at FanDuel. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Thrift RJ Harvey did what RJ Harvey does in this one. I was impressed by that young man. He was a bright spot for UCF on offense when they were unable to really get anything going through the air. Ja'Cory Brown made a few passes early. They didn't really test down the field either in this one. And then late, he just threw interceptions. So without RJ Harvey, this thing is completely out of control. But still, he was the bright spot for them in this one.
Yeah, is now over 1,000 yards for consecutive seasons. And that is one of the things that you're going to get from a Gus Malzahn led offense. You're going to get 1,000-yard back. You put that down. You talk about FanDuel every single year, pretty much that's a lock. You're going to get 1,000-yard back in a Gus Malzahn offense. I'm with you. Harvey was hard to tackle. He had 16 carries, 7.9 yards a carry. In my opinion, he needed the ball a little bit more. The problem is the offense didn't have the ball that much. Last week, he had close to 200 yards against Iowa State. Yes, he has been the lone bright spot for a lackluster offense this year in Central Florida. But I like Harvey. I think he is going to vie, if he continues the way he's going, for maybe all Big 12 honors. And I think that he should be in that mix, but he was definitely the bright spot. He had that 54-yard run, and he's electric, and I'm looking forward to seeing him play on Sundays.
Yeah, look, he is the 3rd leading rusher in the country right now at 1,017 yards. You mentioned he's averaging 6.8 yards per carry on the year. The only guys in front of him right now are Caleb Johnson from Iowa, and of course the electric Ashton Genty at Boise State, who leads the country with 1,376 yards and 18 touchdowns on the season. So RJ Harvey is definitely in the conversation for one of the best running backs in the country this year. And you said it. This is Gus is going, if he'll do anything, he's going to produce 1,000-yard rusher.
Yeah.
And because his initial plan at quarterback failed in KJ Jefferson. We all know the story. He got benched a couple weeks ago. They decided to go with Ja'Cory Brown and EJ Colson. Colson never sniffed this one, but RJ Harvey becomes even more important week by week as you try to salvage what's left of this season. Now, you mentioned the losing streak. Keeping RJ Harvey going obviously is at the top of the list, but what else do you play for in a season like this if you're UCF?
I'm with you, and that's what I was thinking before coming on. What do you take away from this season? Okay, because now you don't have the 5th-year quarterback in KJ Jefferson, who has a ton of experience. You're playing with freshmen. So kind of Gus is kind of playing with house money right now because he's playing with inexperienced quarterbacks. But I hate the fact that Harvey's having such a sensational year. I'm looking right now, 5 of the 8 games, he's had over 120 yards rushing. He is on pace to have over 1,600 yards on the year, close to 20 touchdowns, and yet they may not even make a bowl game. So then, yes, all Big 12 honors, but if UCF was more competitive and we're talking maybe vying for a Big 12 championship, those numbers for Harvey now look like All-American numbers, as he should be recognized for that, playing in the Big 12. I think that if you're UCF and if you're Gus Malzahn, you're playing for next year, obviously. Now, the question is, are you going to be allowed to do that and build for the future. Now this is year 4, and it seems like you kind of regress these last 2 seasons, but at least you have something that you can, and Harvey, continue to give him the rock. I don't see any other option. What else are you playing for other than making a bowl game? You have to finish out with Arizona State, West Virginia, and Utah. All those are winnable games. All those are losable games for UCF. And obviously finding out who is going to be your quarterback for next year. This 4 quarterbacks you played in one season, that's got to stop, man. Mike, you got to have someone that you're going to stick with and that you can have some momentum with him heading into next offseason. And right now, who's that guy for you? Because I don't know who it is.
Yeah, look, I think in today's college football, what's happening at UCF really underscores the dangers of and risks in the portal. Mm-hmm. You went out and you got KJ Jefferson, the high-profile transfer from the SEC from Arkansas. And when he did not pan out, there was no viable option behind him. And that's scary. Now, Ja'Cory Brown had his moments, in the last few games. He 13 rushes for 154 yards versus Iowa State. But the lack of threat with his arm makes UCF way too one-dimensional. And I think what happened to them in this game versus BYU, you get down quickly. And then suddenly you're playing catch-up. So now maybe you're having to throw the ball a little bit more than you would like. And it's really hard to catch up running the ball as much as they have to because Ja'Cory is not a real threat down the field with his arm. At least not right now, he's not. And that's how you get unbalanced. You go 3 and out, and that's how it ends up with the time of possession looking like it did in this one. 40 minutes to 20 minutes, Thrift.
Yeah.
Wow. Look around college football today. We saw Vandy take down Alabama. How did they do it? They just held the ball. That's it. 42 minutes to 18 minutes time of possession. I would show me a game where you lose time of possession by 20 minutes and that team won.
Yeah, exactly. And then and also add this to it too. They almost beat Texas this past week. So that's another conversation for another day. But I love what Vanderbilt's been able to do. But I'm with you, man. And last week you had over 300 yards rushing, against Iowa State.
Feels like they need that to win at this point.
And you didn't get it at home against BYU. Yeah. No offense to BYU, but I think Iowa State's got a pretty good defense. And you scored 35 last week at Iowa State.
BYU's tough, though. BYU's defense is tough, and they're underrated. And BYU fans are in our mentions all week. They're letting us know, hey, I think BYU wins this by 17 or more.
Yeah, look.
And they were. I mean, UCF closed it a little bit at the end, but at the end of the day, BYU fans weren't wrong. And they were a little disrespected. And how can you find your team here? You hung your defense out to dry with your offense. That's what this boils down to. You hung your defense out to dry, so they looked a little worse for the wear in this one because you lost time of possession and they got worn down in this one by a really, really good BYU offense.
Yeah, and what is one thing that has been the Achilles heel for Gus Malzahn in the last 10 years? I'm saying going back to when he was at Auburn, has been the development at the quarterback position. Yeah. And I honestly thought the one thing that, and this is why I was so high on UCF. I know you said maybe lack of competition, upset, and beating TCU on that last second play. They're 3-0. You weren't ready to say they're ready to win the Big 12, but you believe that UCF can win 9 or 10 games this year. And I thought that same thing. And KJ Jefferson is something that Gus Malzahn has always been successful with. That's a quarterback that's already been developed and that has been in the league, played in the SEC or played at some type of high-level football. Nick Marshall, Jared Stidham, Cam Newton. All 3 of the success seasons that he had at Auburn, all 3 of those guys came from other programs. And then they came to Auburn. They were successful. I thought the same thing with KJ Jefferson because I thought he was a fantastic quarterback at Arkansas. I didn't know why Sam Pittman wanted him to leave. And then now he's not even starting anymore. That really was a huge gut punch, I think, to this program because they put a lot of onus, especially Gus and KJ being successful because everyone behind him, obviously you're seeing now inexperienced and not ready. Not saying they can't be ready in the future, but right now, obviously they're not living up to their expectations in this conference.
Yeah, look, KJ Jefferson didn't pan out. Ja'Cory Brown is not panning out. EJ Colson seems like he's not ready. What's the plan? We're going to talk a little bit about what the plan may be at quarterback right after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at Gametime. Thrift, I don't know about you, but I love going to games live. And I know you cover games live. Our friends at Gametime, they have a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live much, much easier. Gametime Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. This is how it works, right? Gametime Picks curation makes it easier to save money more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever it is. They have all-in pricing, and targeting this feature shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. This is my bugaboo. I go to checkout, and then suddenly it's like $50 on the end of it. You get panoramic views of your seat so you can see where you're sitting, and a low price guarantee, or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime Picks. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your purchase. Thrift, you talked about how this thing ended and all the quarterback carousel that is the Gus Malzahn offense this year. He put in a quarterback at the end. He put in the fourth-string quarterback at the end of the game, Dylan Risk. He took a risk, they might say. And Dylan led a touchdown drive. He went 6 for 10 for over 100 yards. Now, I know it was the end of the game, but he made some impressive throws. Do we see the fourth-string quarterback starting a game here next week versus Arizona? They got to go out to Arizona. Wow. What if this kid ends up being just dynamite for Gus? What if the quarterback of the future was sitting on the bench?
Yeah, well, and that's the question, I guess the $1 million question with this program right now. What are you building for next year? You're 3-5. You're out of the race in the Big 12. I mean, and ultimately, we talk about this all the time, Mike. I mean, making a bowl game, it's not a big deal the way it used to be 30 years ago. Okay, most of the kids and most of the seniors don't even care about playing in the bowl game. But having a winning record, having some type of momentum heading into next offseason, and maybe having the quarterback of the future, maybe that is what Gus Malzahn needs to figure out. I mean, he did come in mop-up duty, 6 of 10 with a touchdown over 100 yards. I mean, I don't know how he would have played if he had started the whole game against the number ones from that BYU defense, especially that defensive line who UCF had a tough time blocking. Brown was running for his life. That's why he turned the ball over, 2 times before coming out of the game. I'm hoping that this is going to be someone that obviously starts next week. We don't know yet, but what other option you got? Do you play Brown, who looked horrible this week? He wasn't a barn burner the week before. He's maybe a little bit better with his legs than Risk is. It depends on what you're doing. Now, if you're running the zone read offense like the 2013 Auburn team when Gus was leading it back then, and you got Nick Marshall, Mason, Corey Grant, maybe like a RJ Harvey, maybe you keep Brown. Okay. And you just hope that eventually the passing game will continue to develop with him. If not, and you don't think he has it to be able to break down defenses, to be able to win, your running game is not there, pick apart a defense and make plays like the Retzlaff kid did for BYU, then let's go ahead and put in the fourth string. What do you got to lose at this point? I don't think you have anything to lose. I think this is the option that Gus needs to go with. And then, obviously, expectations is you're supposed to lose. So if you do win with him, maybe that continues in the right trajectory for Gus Malzahn and the rest of this year.
Yeah, it's tough, right? You've got a young quarterback, and, he's on your team, but your plan A didn't work out, Thrift. Your plan B didn't work out. Your plan C is too young. and now you're on plan D. And I think this is a tough situation for him to be in, but I want to give the young man credit here. Now, I know he came in at the end of the game, but it's a bugaboo of mine is when we discredit what some of these kids do with the snaps that they get, right? At the end of the game, you just have to play the snaps that you get. Right. Because if he had gone out there and flubbed it, we'd be sitting here thinking, well, he's not the answer. We'd use it to write him off. So, look, I was a little impressed with how he threw the ball, how he looked natural out there. And I've seen quarterbacks in college football go out there in lesser circumstances and look like a deer in headlights. He did not look like that at the end of the game. If you're Gus, I just think you just need an answer, and you need more of a semblance of a passing game. KJ Jefferson was supposed to give you that. Ja'Cory Brown, I'm not sure that's it. I wondered if they would give him more passes in this one than they gave him. They gave him less passes than last week. He had 14 attempts. I'm sorry, 17 attempts.
Yeah. And
it's 17 attempts, man. You've got to be able to throw the ball more. And BYU, if I'm BYU, I don't respect it. I don't respect his arm, his ability to be able to beat you. You don't trust it. You've shown me that you don't trust it. So I load the box, and I know that RJ Harvey is going to be good enough that he's going to get his. But are you going to beat me and my quarterback, Jake Retzlaff, just running the ball the whole game? Probably not.
All right. So my question to you is this, Mike. What if you're Gus? Put on your Gus Malzahn visor right now. Okay. I just bought you one. You put on the UCF Gus Malzahn visor.
Okay. The sweater vest too.
And the sweater vest as well. Love the sweater vest. What is your option? Is your option, I need to make a bowl game this year so my fans are happy? Is your option, I need to find a quarterback for next year? What is it? Because if it's making a bowl game, I feel like you got to go back to KJ Jefferson because he still is the best option.
He's not in the plans. Yeah, he's not in the plans.
He's out of the plan. So that makes me think it's not about bowl game now. It's about finding the future at the QB position. Why not give this kid a chance? Yeah. What, again, do you have to lose playing a fourth-string, a redshirt freshman at this point? And who knows, like you said, what if he ends up coming out and playing the game of his life? And again, I won't discredit it. He did have 31 yards rushing. Okay. He did have a touchdown pass. Again, it was in mop-up duty. It was 34-10, but he didn't turn the ball over. He came in. He didn't look like a deer in headlights. He did make a few plays with his legs. Those are all positive things looking for next week. And BYU's still good, even though they may not have had their first string in. He still was able to move the football. Give him that opportunity. But what does that opportunity entail? Does it entail if he starts struggling that he's getting yanked in the first half? Are we going to allow him? Is Gus going to allow him to make mistakes and give him the entire game to really decide, I'm going to let this guy finish out the season? Let's see what that opportunity entails. Because in my opinion, you let him play the whole game, even if he messes up, even if you lose. Why does it matter if you're 3-5 or 3-6 and 4-5? You still have a losing record.
Yeah, I think that the opponents that they have left, I don't think they have anybody left on their schedule that's as good as BYU. So maybe he's thinking I can beat these teams with Ja'Cory and get to the offseason. But I'm with you. I think you're really evaluating now whether you feel like what is the future here? Because right now, and we won't get into it tonight, but if you're Gus, how hot do you feel your seat is right now? Because I'll tell you this, there's something about at least finding some hope in these last few games by winning, three out of the last four, maybe, win as many as you can. Because it's not like you can just close on a 9-game losing streak and then expect to keep your job at the end of the year. He still, he may not. UCF, what are they playing for? They're playing for their coach's job, honestly, right now, I think, is where it's at. And talking to UCF fans, they feel like he's had enough time, and they're frustrated with where their program is at right now. And I think it all comes down to, and a lot of teams are in this predicament right now in college football. We made a bad decision at quarterback in the portal, and look where we're at right now. Thrift, I want to thank you for joining me today. Before we get out of here, I just want to tell people you can find the Thrift at his on Twitter, Coach T_SV. Please go give him a follow. Fantastic follow there. Guys, that's it for another great edition of Locked On UCF. Thank you for making Locked On UCF your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On Big 12. Our guy Drake Toll leads the conversation in conference realignment news and holds no punches when it comes to covering every team in the Big 12. Find Locked On Big 12 on YouTube, wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm your guy, Mike G. We're out. We'll see you guys tomorrow with more Locked On UCF.